We have our first performer is going to be Neshama Franklin. And Neshama is, she's been performing with us forever, which is, no, but it's what's great. I love it. She's been here since the beginning. Now, so let me just read a little bit about it. Neshama has been telling stories ever since she could talk. She got her professional start in the '89 at the Marin County Library, where she still works and has performed all over the place ever since. She tells both personal and folk tales. She also has a radio show on KWMR and a weekly blog at the Marin County Library. Check her out on YouTube. So she's right here. Her piece is called
There's these beads, and I don't want
Oh,
anybody
the beads.
to slip
Oh,
on them.
thank you.
I just want to pick up the ones that are actually on stage, so we don't have somebody.
All right, Neshama Franklin will be performing My Brilliant Careers. I love the name. All right. She's right here. Come right up.
Oh, I am so excited to be corporeally performing. I've zoomed ever since COVID. I'm on the little squares, and the squares are not bad. They're intimate, but here we are in person, breathing together. So I have to tell you that I flunked out of high school and I got kicked out of college, and because I could never finish my papers and other things. And I really, so I don't have any credentials of any sort, and I really don't have any skills to speak of. I was brought up on the Upper West Side of New York City, and we were cosseted, and so I had no babysitting experience. I had no food service experience. I was just, like a stripped egg out in the world. But, there I was. Did someone say something? Okay. I was kicked out of college, and I had to do something which meant getting a job. Now, I did have a little bit of training. One dim summer on 42nd Street in New York City, which was very sleazy back then, except for the New York Public Library, I went to speed writing school. And there I learned how to type with difficulty. I had to type, "The beaver is a very funny animal," over and over. The beaver is not a funny animal, third time around. And about speed writing, it's kind of like shorthand, sleazy shorthand. And the only thing I got from it is you can put a little dot next to the word instead of a the. And in my journal, I have dots all over the place. But in any case, there I was. And so my mother, who was very clever, she hit up an old nanny of ours who had risen in the world and was now working at Columbia University in the transcript office. And so she kind of shoehorned me in as a transcript clerk. And you don't need a lot of skills to stand behind a counter. And the student comes up and said, "I need my transcript." And I say the boilerplate, "Well, you give me your money and in 3 days your transcript will be ready." And they always said, "I need it yesterday." And I knew that in that file cabinet over there was what they needed. And I could just pull it out and go to the copy machine and copy it off and hand it to them. And that's the way I've always been a rebel. That's the way I did that job. And they must have noticed that the protocol had gotten scrambled. But I think the transcript office went more smoothly with the way I did it. Now, when I was making all those copies, this was the late 50s, I was wearing a peasant blouse with no bra. That's what we did back then. And every time I leaned over to make these copies, I got the attention of a young man named John Franklin, who had come to the big city to make his fortune, which you don't make at Columbia University. And, working he was putting in some kind of weird computer system with punch cards and rods. You stick the rods through and shake them and the cards would fall out. Totally weird. But in any case, we started living together, which you don't do. And then at a certain point, he said, I need to get a real job downtown. And he did. And it was time for me to get out of the nest. of the transcript office and see what was waiting for me. So I looked in the newspaper, no internet, and there was a classified, and it said they were looking for some kind of office worker for some weird sounding magazine on 42nd Street, no less. So I went down there, and what did I find? It was a kind of a slightly seedy office with some battered furniture. There may have been one or two people working somewhere doing something, but the guy, Ron Levy, he was, well, I've never seen anything like him. He had a buzz cut that looked electrified, and he had a smile that was kind of like a jack-o'-lantern. His teeth were very peculiar, and he was febrile. He was kind of almost sweating. He was just beaming with huge enthusiasm. And I gave him my resume about my fine work as a transcript clerk. And he talked to me, and he looked at the resume, and he said, no, you're not going to be an office worker. You're going to be a salesperson. And I said, huh? And he said, look at you. You look like a really well brought up kid. You talk like a college professor. They won't know what hit him. And so that's how I hit him. I wore my Claire McCardle dress, and I had my hair in a chignon because I was a dancer, and I had a briefcase, and I came into these swanky public relations offices with what I was offering, which was, well, the firm was called North American Tracy Syndicate, whatever the hell that meant. A Tracy is a mat. It's just a piece of text with a picture in it. And a newspaper person can just drop it in the newspaper, no typesetting, no cut and paste. And so it's kind of nice filler that hitches, but they never saw it as such. There's always a plug in it for, to make some money for somebody with kind of sneaky public relations. And so I went out and sold this service all over the place, and Ron was in heaven. And then I had to go out and do another round. And I said, Ron, look at these results. I mean, they got 3 clips, and one was from the Petaluma Argus Courier, wherever the hell that is. And Ron said they're thrilled. If they get anything in print, they're thrilled. And so I went out again with a little less enthusiasm, and I did just fine. And then it was time for a third round, which I didn't have the cojones for anymore. I just took the coward's way out. By now, John and I were married, and I got pregnant and had a kid. So there was a kind of dim part of my not so brilliant career, because you remember I had done no babysitting. I had a small family. I didn't know anything about these children. I had 2 in a row. What I really wanted to do was read in my spare time. And so I would plonk the kids in the playpen where they were not that happy, and I would read my books. And my mother-in-law from the Midwest, she said, nose in a book, nose in a book. And she was right. But in any case, we got through it, their toddler years somehow. And when they were ready to go to school, I was ready to go to work. And there was this progressive school 10 blocks from where we lived in San Francisco, and they needed a cook's helper. Now, the cook they had hired, his name was Nevilton Baker, and he was very handsome, very charming, African-American. He didn't know how to cook at all, despite his last name. And so I had gotten some domestic chops out of necessity. And so I helped Nevilton cook until he left, and a real cook came in. And then the school secretary, Verna, she ran off to join the Renaissance Fair. And she said, you can have my job. And that's how I became a school secretary. Now, here we come to irony number 1. There'll be a lot of them studied throughout this story, because you know how I felt about school. I mean, I didn't finish my papers, and they always wanted me to read things, and I wanted to read other things. But I figured my kids were there, and I just give it what I could give it, which was open heart and welcoming. And so that's the way I was a school secretary. And I had, it turns out, a wonderful time. And what I discovered about schools is, first of all, the school secretary runs everything. And you don't know that, but she does. And then there was a lot of drama, and I love drama. There was a palace revolt. There were new parents that came in, and they decided that the person who had started it, who was a very lovely old progressive lady, they kicked her out. She was old and in the way, and they brought in a guy from Reading who liked to play the jazz saxophone. I don't even know if he knew anything about school, but in any case, there we were together, and it got a little weird. And then we got well, not exactly kicked out of our San Francisco apartment. You could say the landlord wanted it back. And we went across the bridge to the country, to Marin County, to West Marin. And you know what was 2 blocks from our house? The Billina Stinson Unified School District. And I knew how to do that stuff. And I got a job there. Now, again, big fancy title for basically a trailer. That was the district office. Because the regular office had burned down. It was a farmhouse. And so there I was, offering the same wide open, welcoming, whatever I can do to make you feel good since you have to be in school. And, you know, I just had a wonderful time. And there were also enormous dramas, because this was now the mid-70s, you know, anything went. There were these parents who wanted a Summerhill type school, ungraded, you know, all ages. And then there were the parents on the other side who wanted a real school. They called themselves Winterditch as opposed to Summerhill. So we had all these factions going, and you should have seen the board meetings. They were pounding on tables and turning them over. Oh, it was so much fun. But something else was going on in that little trailer, this long, lanky drink of water, the superintendent, principal. And, you know, it was a time of open marriage, and you know, so we, you know, in that trailer we would close the curtains when everybody left and drink a couple of beers and canoodle, and it worked, you know, went even further than that. And at a certain point it couldn't be sustained, and so he quit and I quit, and that's where I left the school secretary division of my careers. But what was waiting for me? Well, up on the hill in our town, in an old brutalist RCA transmitting station, no more transmitting up there, there were some visionaries, and they decided that they were going to do alternative medicine, things like hair analysis and muscle testing, all kinds of stuff nobody knew anything about. And they hired me as a clinic coordinator. I mean, I guess I kind of knew how to coordinate things. In this case, it was coordinating, you know, trying to herd cats, because nobody knew what they were doing. But I did it for a while. It was kind of fun. And then they said, you know, the town has no medical services, so we should really provide a doctor for the town. Would you like to stay up on the hill with us or go down there? And I said, down there to a real medical office, because I'm fascinated by medicine. And so there I was, clinic coordinator. But there were a couple of problems. This is another part of my not so brilliant career, is that I'm not good with numbers and I'm kind of a little squeamish. So I wasn't good at any of those tests that assistants are supposed to do. And then I had to balance the books, and I didn't do that very well. I had to reach into my pocket and take out $1 and change to make them look good. But here was the worst part, is I had thought of myself as very empathetic. And now I know it was codependence. But I would go back to the doctor. I think he confused me with his mother, and he did not like me very much. And I'd say, you know, they've been waiting for 2 hours and they're getting really anxious. And he said, Neshama, you think we don't know that? We're back here, you're out there, you deal with it. And then finally he said, let's take a walk. And so we took a walk up on the mesa. I was wearing clogs, which are suitable for working in a clinic. And he said, you know, Neshama, I don't think this job is the right fit for you. And because I'm so dramatic, I said, I've devoted my life to, and he just said, and I backed out of that job. And what was waiting for me in a town not that far away? Another set of visionaries. I found this out through the classified ads. You know, they wanted an office worker for some funny sounding magazine. I went up there and the editor, he looked at my resume, he talked to me, he said, no, you're not going to be an office worker. You're going to be an editor. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, you talk really well. You obviously read really well. You can do it. I will train you. And I got a crash course in editing. You know, I love to mark up because when I was reading, I was always finding typos, you know, and stuff that was already in print. And so I became an editor. And irony number whatever is they also gave me writing assignments and I had to finish my papers and they got out there. And so we did, you know, I think it lasted for about 5 years, but out there, people had caught on that they needed to take charge of their own health because the doctors were not doing the greatest job of it. And so there were glossy magazines that came out with less clunky titles than medical self-care. And so we turned into a catalog and then we dissolved. And then what? Well, I have been hanging out in libraries ever since I learned to read, and I knew every librarian in the whole county. And they always said, when you stop doing what you're doing, come work for us. And that's what I did 34 years ago. It was like coming home. And it was really like being the school secretary, except, you know, I wasn't welcomed to school. I was welcomed into my house. I just wanted people to feel, you know, invited and relaxed and stimulated. And that's what I've done all these years. Now, if you hang around long enough, sometimes there are really exciting changes. And about halfway through my tenure, administration got it. They said when people walk into the library and they see a staff person, they don't care if they're circulation or reference. They just want an answer to their question. So they cross-trained us. And I could answer their questions with the help of Dr. Google. And they learned how to check in and check out books. And I could really claim the title that I was a faux librarian and proud of it. And so it's just been going on from that day to this. And it got me into storytelling because they needed a storytelling witch. One of them had gotten sick. And so they gave me a story to tell. And I said, I'm supposed to tell that to kids. And they said, yes. And I was launched. And I also have a shelf in the library of stuff I read with a little review in it, so that people who know my taste, which is pretty dark, can go over there and find something to read. They don't have to look at all the stuff out there. And I have a blog. I tell them about 4 books each week that I really liked. I read twice or 3 times as much as those. And so after this circuitous trail full of ironies, look where I've landed. And I hope to be there a long, long time. Now, I mean, I had this fantasy that, you know, I keel over and they just roll me out on a book truck with my feet. But it's not going to be that. I mean, something's going to give and I'm going to have to stop doing what I love to do so much. But in the meanwhile, I celebrate and it fills me with constant joy.